It's James Murray. We're in the Net News Ledger newsroom, joined by Gary Wassaykeesic. Gary, for the last 40 years almost, has been on a quest and on a journey over an issue that still concerns many Canadians about murdered and missing Indigenous women. Gary, share your story with us.
Yeah, my name is Gary Wassaykeesic. I'm Ojibwe. I'm from Mishkeegogaming First Nation, which is situated about 500 miles north of Thunder Bay. My mother, missing murdered Native women's issues, was murdered good 39, 40 years ago down in the small town of Central Pat, Ontario, down towards the Pickle Lake area. Back then it was a mining town, and me being Ojibwe and me being First Nations, I've experienced the residential schools, I've experienced the 60 scoop and the politics that played out in this land concerning First Nations, land claims and other issues. And then with the missing murdered Native women's issues, I've become very well aware of that fact. Like I said, my mother was murdered in 1976, March 1976. I was in a residential school at the time. I was in Poplar Hill, to be exact, run by Mennonites, Poplar Hill Residential School, just outside of Red Lake, north of Red Lake, Ontario. It was there that I learned that my mother had passed. And this is one fact that I'd like to talk about, is kind of like try to clear this, try to making people understand. When I heard about my mother in Poplar Hill, that she had passed on, they didn't give me the information that she had passed on either violently, or she didn't give me no information like that. They just said that she had passed on, and that and then when like when you're hearing news like that, you go into shock, man. You go into, it starts hitting you hard, and you start thinking, man, like what, when, and then they told me, this is what blows you away, man. This happened in March. I'm not hearing this until like way after the fact, after the funeral, after everything's over and done with. I hear it around August, September. And this school that I was going to had full contact with my community, First Nations community, Mishkeegogaming, which used to be called Osnaburg. Had full contact. They had phone contact, they had letter contact. They actually had students coming in, other students coming in from Mishkeegogaming to attend the residential school, so they had full contact. But there's little known facts where that policies, laws, and rules that were made for kids and people that went to residential schools, and one of them was to one of the concern in my case anyways is the policy of and I learned this from my university professor down in Southern Ontario when I was doing the activism looking into my mother's case. And the policy was to not to inform the child of a passing of a parent, whether it was your grandfather, your grandmother, and whether it's your father, your mother, or siblings for that matter. They didn't inform you. And that was to create that dysfunctionalism that I later experienced, the alcoholism, the drug addiction, the constant, emotional roller coaster ride that you go through, trying to figure out what happened, why, what. Anyways, so I never really learned what happened with my mother through the residential school. They never informed me. I just learned that she had passed on. And you go into shock and all that, and the very next day I was in school. I was back in school. There was no letter, there was no condolences, there was no hugs, there was nothing. I was just back in school. That was it. They informed you, you go to sleep, back in school. So from that point on, I remember thinking, when they told me that, I went through my little, maybe grieving process, but it wasn't much of a grieving process because after that experience of being informed as to what happened with my mother, that she had passed on, and the shock of it all not being informed, I vowed, I remember that day, So I vowed, never will I be touched again. Never will I be, nobody will ever hurt me again. And like I said, the dysfunctionism starts setting in, the PTSD. And then from that point on, I ended up in foster homes, group homes, training schools, detention centers, jails. You know, when if you don't listen in these institutions, they put you in places like the hole, you know. And I ended up in the hole quite a few times, you know. Like so, but you know, like I said, from that point on, when I learned about my mother, and then not being informed, and then other facts started to come out, I started getting mad. You know, I started getting, you know, dysfunctional, and that's what happened. From the residential school, after I was informed, I was just placed in another home in Kenora, Kuwaitan. The other side of Kenora is Kuwaitan. I was put in the home. So I'm you know, like, all of this that I talk about is on the internet. You can Google Gary Wassaykeesic, GaryWassaykeesic. I've been doing demonstrations, rallies, train blockades, road blockades. I've been put on probation. I've been in courthouses all along the way, mentioning my mother's case, why I got into the activism, you know. So you can learn quite a bit of this on the internet. But you know, I'm here doing this interview, and I'm trying to get as much information out as possible. And the thing is, just recently, like I said, I've been doing demonstrations, rallies, and you know, always mentioning my mother's case, always wanting the, you know, looking for that closure, looking for that, hoping to make that victim impact statement, you know, like, because not only was I affected, I have a large family. I come from a large family. Wassaykeesic is a big name. I have uncles, I have aunts, I have brothers, I have, you know, I had sisters, I had, you know, so when this guy did what he did, you know, it impacted a lot of people, not just me, you know. My younger brother was there that evening when it all happened, and he tried to pull the guy off, and the guy almost got him, you know. So not only did he, you know, now there's an allegation out there that not only did it kill my mother, but he also killed the lady that used to live next door to us. And the fact that my mother was the second victim, not the first victim, she was the second. The first victim was Barbara. I won't say her last name, I'll just say Barbara, you know. But same situation as my mother. Living with her, we're living with the kids, with her kids, with their mother. Same situation as my mother. He got her too. So, you know, this guy's never been prosecuted, never been charged, never been investigated, you know. For the past 9 years, I've been trying to get to this guy. And so, you know, just within the last couple of days, last, 2 days now, I did finally get to him. 39 years it took. Close to 40 years it took to get to this guy. I told the coroner, the head coroner of Ontario, Dr. Eden, I said, man, if you guys don't do anything, if you guys don't want, you know, if you don't want to charge him, if you don't want to take care of him, I'll take care of him. I'll go look for him. I'll find him, you know. I told that to Detective Mark Hutchinson, Major Crimes Unit, Thunder Bay, you know. I told him, I said, man, if you guys ain't going to do nothing, I'll do it, you know. Like I said, I've already done time, man. I know what time is all about. I ain't scared of doing time. So, you know, that's what life does to you, you know. So anyways, like I said, you know, I'm in touch with law firms, Aboriginal Legal Services. I'm in touch with other law firms. I'm in touch with human rights. I'm in touch with so many other groups and organizations that have been trying to, you know, hopefully even Native organizations and our Native political organizations. I've been trying to get them to help me out, you know. And Onwa, I told them, I approached them. I've approached missing, murdered Native women's issues. I've approached Sisters in Spirit, you know. Sad to say, man, nobody's done a damn thing, you know. No letters, no phone calls to the detectives, no phone calls to the coroner, no phone calls to, you know, Aboriginal Legal Services or other, you know, asking if anything's being done on my mother's case on behalf of the family, Wassaykeesic family, you know, nothing. So anyways, after all that is said and done, you know, like I said, I've been doing this for about 9 years now, trying to get this guy, you know. But a couple of days ago, you know, I actually got to see for the first time. I got right next to him. It took 39, 40 years to get next to this guy. I remember telling him as a kid, man, I'm gonna come get you. I'm gonna come look for you. I was a kid back then. Because I learned as a kid who did it. I learned as a kid what he had done. After I got into Kuwaitan on the other side of Kenora, they put me in that home after that residential school in Poplar Hill. After my mother had been murdered, I couldn't go home no more. I had no family situation back home. So they put me in institutions. That was their answer, you know. So I end up in all these places. But you know, when I got to Kuwait, you know, after I learned about my mother's death, you know, before that I'd been bounced around in foster homes, group homes, training schools, jails. I was even in jail by the time I was 7, you know, you know. And then I finally make it home after Poplar Hill, after Kuwait. I begged them, come on, man, you gotta let me go home, man. I just learned about my mother's death, and up to that point, I'd been away from home since I was 7, and I was 11 or something like that when I learned about my mother's death. All that time, I'd been in one institution after another. And then I finally hear about my mother's case. I end up in another institution. They don't send me home. They send me into another institution. I begged them, come on, man, let me go home. At least let me go visit my family, man. My mother, you know, she died, and you guys won't let me go home. At least go visit. Anyways, I finally convinced them. I said, okay, come on, man, let me go home. So they let me go home. They said, okay, you can stay home 4 days. 4 days after all this time in institutions and training schools and jails and, you know, wherever they put you, right? And they let you go home. Your mother's been killed, or I didn't know at the time she had been killed. All I knew, she was dead. And they said, okay, we'll give you 4 days, you know. So I go home 4 days. I'm glad, 4 days. Okay, yeah, I'll go, you know. So I go home. Almost right away, I find out what happened with my mother. It's in a small mining town, lots of drinking, one cop in town. Racism is alive and well. Don't forget, this is 1976. You know, a lot of attitude, and it's a mining town, miners. And there's also fisheries there, you know, and there's also a lot of what would you say, racism that's alive and well in this small little town, Pickle Lake and Central Pat and Pickle Lake, you know, in the 70s, you know. I remember being told as a kid who to watch out for, which race to watch out for, you know, in a small mining town, you know. And I remember, you know, groups of, I used to remember watching gang fights in this small town, lots of action in this small town. Anyways, I get home from Poplar Hill, I get home from Kuwait, 4 days they give me. I find out within 2 days what happened with my mother and who did it. And they pointed to the guy who did, they said, your mother was killed by this man. And when you're a kid, you go into shock, man. You start thinking, man. You know, like I said, I'd already been through foster homes, group homes, training schools and all that by the time I was 11. So when I was informed my mother had been killed by this guy in town, and he's still walking around, I flipped. I went, you know, I started going after the guy. And I was just a kid. I didn't have enough sense to go run to the cop shop. I didn't have enough sense to go to the police station. I didn't get a hold of the lawyers. I didn't even go to my family. I didn't even tell my uncles. I didn't even tell, even though they were big boys, you know, in this small little town, you know. I didn't tell nobody. I just went after him myself. I'd wait at parties. I'd wait in the basement. I used to wait in the basement. I'd fall asleep waiting for this guy, you know, hoping he'd pass out or he'd be drunk enough where I can get him. But, you know, sometimes they'd find me, and they'd find me in the house and they'd throw me out. They'd beat me up, throw me out. And they knew where I was coming from. They knew what I was after. And up to the point of where he almost got me down the back road. He was strangling me down the back road. And the comment that he made to my cousin pulled him off and dragged him off once he seen, you know, this guy beating me up. He made that comment to my cousin. He says, I'm gonna kill this guy like I killed his mother. My cousin says he's gonna remember that forever. He says, the tone of his voice, the comment that he made, you know, And then he beat him up because he was trying to strangle me. And him and Gordy and Dougie, they pulled him off, beat him up, and sent him on his way. But I was just a kid at the time. We were drinking, and I passed out outside when I was attempting to follow them. I woke up in a bathtub. That night alone, I almost died about 4, 5, 6 times. I woke up in the bathtub, man. And the fact that this guy was strangling me before they pulled him off. So, you know, I don't know how many times I almost died that night. But just, you know, alcohol poisoning. You know, we're just kids. We're drinking. So, but anyways, he almost got me down the back road. And then, but one of the things I remember about that whole episode about going after him is the one final time that he did throw me out, the one final time that I remember seeing him, is he was about ready to throw me out again. And this time he's probably gonna, beat the hell out of me. But he's coming towards me, and his brother put his arm out and stopped him. And I remember pointing to the guy and just like full of anger and just shaking and crying. And I said, I'm going to come and get you, man. I'm going to come and get you. One of these days I'm going to come look for you. So that's about the last time I seen him. And
how long ago would that be, Gary?
that's like 1976, which is today, you know.
Yeah.
It's just the last couple of days I seen him, you know,
No,
figured that out.
I mean, when you saw him as a kid,
Yeah.
that was how long ago?
I was 11 years old at the time around
Okay.
there, in 1976 to this day, right? And you know, so I've known what this guy's done all these years, right? He's never been charged, never been prosecuted, you know. And one of the reasons that I found out, you know, during my investigation into my mother's death, is that one of the reasons that they moved out of Central Pat is the rumor mill started really picking up when my mother died. A small mining town, lots of drinking, lots of like stuff that I've mentioned. But in a small mining town, you know, the rumor mill, right? You know, there's hidden codes in a small mining town. Codes like you don't tell cops, you don't rat, you don't say nothing, you know. See something, look the other way, you know. So, you know, this is what I had to go up against. You know, a small mining town, the attitude at the time, the racism, the mentality. And so when my mother was killed, she was the second victim. And then that's when the rumor mill took off.